This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
I believe it's a battle for the soul of America. I believe it is a battle that says that what kind of country are we going to be now? Are we going to be one that listens to Latinos, Asians, African Americans, Native Americans, gays, lesbians? Or are we going to be a country that is authoritarian, homogeneous?
In the late 20th century, the airways of the world were controlled by a few TV network powers. Overhead, corporate satellites sailed the subspace air, flooding the global channels with their capitalist vision. This eliminated the public's access to communications technology. Refusing to be silenced, cadres of media pirates rose to fight the mighty ships of media injustice and reclaim the rights of free speech.
Because the media is doing the same thing. It's a media for the rich, and Dottie's not getting covered, and neither are the people who are not the major candidates for the parties of the rich. And we're tired of that, and we're tired of the fact that she's not covered, that they pretend in the media that there is no other candidate, and we're sick of that. And that's why we're here in the Globe, and why we're staying here in the Globe. What's the big deal?
Mr. Driscoll would like to meet with you privately and without a camera of any kind, okay? So that's the ground rules for the interview.
Time is out for folks stamping on poor people, and we're going to begin to rise up. This is our candidate, and we're not going to tolerate this type of stuff going down anymore, okay? If we have to come in here, crawl in here, walk in here, the Globe will become our focus, all right?
The editor sends a young reporter out to cover a story, or an old reporter. He doesn't know a thing about it. But by the time the 6 o'clock news comes around, or the newspaper goes to press, he has to sound like an expert, as if he understands something. So he goes to the people who do know, the politicians, the public relations guys, and he said, the cop, and he says, "What happened?" And they explain it to him in words so that when the deadline comes, he can sound as if he knew what was going on. And the next day they tell him how well he did. So after a while they get to have this symbiotic relationship. And this becomes a very corrupting thing.
What country are you from? Mexico. Today's raid culminates a 5-week investigation that started with an anonymous phone call to Newswatch 4. Someone saying illegal aliens were working and living at the Camden Place Apartments construction site on Tuttle Crossing, just off I-270 near Hilliard. We checked it out and found dozens of workers who looked Mexican and spoke no English. A few days later, INS agents from Cleveland came to Channel 4 to view the tape. Based on that and information from other sources, they obtained the search warrant for today's raid. The agent's biggest concern going in, these air-driven nail guns the workers use, which can shoot with force enough to drive a nail through a person's skull. But there was no resistance.
I'm Rob Wescoe from Columbus, Ohio. I was a reporter at the daily newspaper in town, the Columbus Dispatch, when this story aired on Channel 4 in summer 1990. As the only Spanish-speaking member on the staff, I thought that I would be very well trained to go out and cover this story. And I went out and covered it, and it didn't take long for me to realize that the more important story was the spectacular way that this investigation came about with the involvement of the television reporter and the Immigration Service. So I proposed to my editors that we run a story looking at the questions of whether journalists behave ethically in getting involved with police, and the editors felt that was a dumb idea, that journalists work with police every day, all the time. What happened here was fairly common. I argued with them quite a bit. They finally relented and said, well, go ahead and whatever you think you need to put into the story. After I left the building, they edited out everything that I put in about the television reporter being involved. I made some phone calls to friends, and I was able to sell the story of the journalist's involvement with police to the Los Angeles Times and to Hispanic Link Weekly Report in Washington. The city editor sat me down and waved the papers in my face and said, this is not a story. Why did you write this? I had already decided to go ahead and write about this for a magazine that looks at journalism questions, and he told me that I would have to go to the editor and get his permission to write about this. And when I did that, and the editor noted that I was taking notes, he fired me on the spot. The whole scenario raises two interesting questions about censorship. The first one, I noted a pattern at the newspaper, and this is maybe happening elsewhere, that issues of conflict that happen close to home don't get scrutinized very closely. When they're distant in other cities and other nations, it's okay to look at them and investigate and take a critical look. But when it happens in your community, it raises more questions than just ethics. There were questions of racism there and questions of human value. The second interesting thing revolves around ethnicity. I'm Mexican-American from Los Angeles. They told me, your ethnicity is getting in the way of this story. Now, what I had taken to be a benefit, bringing another perspective to the job, bringing another language, what I thought was enhancing my ability to do a good job, they saw as a deficit.
Some helpful reminders when you are watching the American news media in action. Watch for these phrases. It will help you decipher what's going on. The interesting passive voice here, believed to be, considered to be. That's where we get to generalize however the hell we want to. Experts, a common noun handy for promoting a favored point of view. Extremists, fanatics, and fringe groups, those are political individuals that meet with U.S. government and media disapproval. Instability, code for situations overseas where the U.S. State Department is unhappy with current events. Intelligence community, a way of making the CIA sound cozy. Military leader, a foreign military dictator the White House doesn't mind a whole lot. Military strongman, a foreign military dictator out of favor with the White House.
Although corporations and government were not completely united in their position on the Gulf War, they comprise the sector of society which benefits most from controlling the oil wealth of the region. Within this context, television itself must be seen as a corporate industry, dependent upon advertisers, corporate profit margins, and most importantly, the need to sell viewers back to sponsors. In addition, TV news relies upon government for its major news stories and is wary of alienating its sources.
How do these economic and political interests influence coverage?
There is a system of domestic power. That's not a great secret. A heavy and narrow concentration of power in the upper reaches of the system of corporate ownership and management that has an enormous influence on everything that happens in the society. It directly determines production, consumption patterns, and so on and so forth. It strongly influences, in fact, largely controls the political system, pretty much limiting it to two factions of a business-oriented party, and setting very narrow parameters on political choices and options. And as far as the media are concerned, they are simply part of that system.
But we are a public corporation. There are people who buy our stock asking us to deliver a return to them. I have always considered myself a banker. I am a banker. I am an officer of a company that uses other people's money and invests it. And we try to use it carefully. So I think it's wonderful that our news department is profitable.
The basic agenda for news interpretation and selection is major corporations selling privileged sectors of the population to other businesses, and quite obviously it's the news product is going to reflect the interests and the commitments of the sellers, the buyers, and the product.
Lots of shows are not profitable, especially those programs that are put on in the public interest, convenience and necessity, it's called.
Well, these various factors basically tend in the same direction, and they tend towards exactly what you would expect on a more or less uncontroversial free market analysis of the way the news media operate. They present a picture of reality that conforms to the needs of power. And power in our own society happens to be largely vested in a state-corporate nexus.
This is the hand that takes. This is the hand that takes. This is the hand that takes. Here come the planes. They're American planes, made in America. Smoking or non-smoking? And the voice said,
hate to country, military man, and wouldn't.
Cause when love is gone, there's always justice. And when justice is gone, there's always force. And when force is gone, there's always mom. Hi, Mom. So hold me, Mom. In your long arms. So hold me now. In your long arms.
In June of 1990, the Federal Communications Commission established a policy which fundamentally betrays the public interest and which grants to broadcasters absolute monopoly rights over the public airwaves. The Commission's policy has fundamentally ignored the intent and the spirit of the Communications Act of 1934. The Federal Communications Commission has said in its recent opinion that 15 minutes a day of news and public affairs programming at 6 a.m. is an adequate standard for broadcasters to meet to fulfill their public interest obligation.
First Amendment rights have been reinterpreted by the Commission and broadcast owners to be a shield for monopoly rather than a means for diversity as the framers of our Constitution intended. That has to be redressed. The marketplace as regulator and definer of communications policy has concentrated power in the hands of a few and robbed the American public of its rights of ownership of the airwaves and its right to be served a varied diet of communications fare, including a broad diversity of viewpoints.
We felt that it was necessary to bring to the public the fact that these stations have been terribly negligent in their treatment of issues affecting minorities.
So that our power to advance as a people, as lesbian and gay people, as women multiracially, as racial minorities, as ethnic minorities, is dependent upon media representation and access to media. And we are eliminated from that process.
Tra-la-la-la, 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 tra-la-la-la. We're making the world safe for capitalism.
PBS was created in 1967 with money from the Ford Foundation and from the government to be an alternative to commercial programming with a specific mandate to serve specialized or underserved audiences.
In the late 70s, when its budget was being cut and corporations saw an advantage, they saw an opportunity to come in and sort of muscle and get a higher profile for their companies.
The three primary funders of PBS now are corporations and other businesses, viewers, and the government, in that order. Government funding is awarded in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The CPB is governed by a presidentially appointed board, which is supposed to insulate PBS from government interference.
We found McNeil-Lehrer to be more conservative than Nightline, which is a network corporate program. McNeil-Lehrer, as part of PBS, is funded by public donations and is supposed to respond to public demands for a broader diversity, and that clearly hasn't been the case.
Stations have found that the best vehicles for fundraising have been programs that do not threaten the audience's sense of well-being. Opera, like classics, science programs, travelogues, they please large numbers of people, bring membership money to the stations which air them, and are easily underwritten by outside funders who desire a good public image.
We have three corporate viewpoint programs each week. One of them is nightly on PBS. You have Adam Smith's Money World, Louis Rukeyser's Wall Street Week, and you have the Nightly Business Report. These are all corporate viewpoint shows. Now, if there were balance on PBS, you could imagine that they would have shows that would represent points of view that might be considered opposed to those. Points of view of consumers, points of view of environmentalists, and the points of view of working people. There are no national shows on PBS about working people.
Mutiny, mutiny, rebels in the hole. Can't hold 'em, can't hold 'em, sling 'em up our
We are in Buffalo, New York, August 1990. The 8mm News Collective is shooting a documentary of television news in Buffalo. On August 1st, 3rd, 6th, 8th, and 10th, I am with the collective as they observe the news operation at WGRZ TV, Channel 2.
calling for Barbara Latazzi. This is David Baer, B-A-E-R. I'm the news director at Channel 2 in Buffalo. I understand you're the contact person for the 8mm News Collective. I need to talk with you about the way your crews are interfering with my news crews on the street. Please call me as soon as possible, 849-5731. I want this practice discontinued, otherwise we're going to have to seek some legal recourse. Please call me so we can dispose of this matter immediately, but I'm tired of dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
I want to work. It's David Baer.
Would you want to see him back?
Respond to a phone call.
Okay, he said he won't see you. He said he can't see you. So if you want to call, you can call and make an appointment.
Well, thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks, nice to talk to you.
They just called the cops on us. They just said WGRZ trespassers in the main lobby.
What?
Here they are.
Should we talk to the policeman?
What's this all about?
What's that all about?
The cameras.
At 9:30, or between 9 and 10, on August 8th, which was 2 days ago, David Baer phoned me, gave me his phone number to set up an appointment. And instead of setting an appointment, he asked to speak to me.
That's me. Okay.
Oh, good. Oh, great. That's who I
Between the time I made that call, you talked with Bob Pfeiffer, who specifically warned you to stay away from our premises.
I was not present at that discussion. You called me, and I am the person that went to the receptionist and asked to make an appointment.
And I also told...
Is everyone present now? These people do not want you on their property. It is against the penal law to trail anyone in a public place. It's harassment.
We're just getting a news story just like you.
What news story? For what operation? For what broadcast?
For public access.
And when is this going to air?
We don't know yet.
It's going to air in September and October.
What channel?
Channel 32, public access.
Okay, and what news stories were you covering?
How the news covers the news.
Why didn't you ask us if you could do that?
Because there wouldn't be a story. It's investigative before.
The newspaper, and this is not a coincidence, I think there's a reason for it, refuses to run in the television listings what's going on the Access channel. And that's a non-commercial listing. People do not pay to have CNN listed, CBS, NBC, ABC. They don't want regular people to make media, because maybe it will sound different than what the mainstream media is putting out.
If everyone wants to gather around and join our Media Jeopardy audience, back to play again, Mr. McNeil Times Post Jennings rather Brokaw Mirror.
Just call me McNews, George.
I'll take media coverage for 400 million.
And that's what it costs, isn't it? Okay. Here's the answer. This really puts the news in newspaper, providing 80% of the copy we read on foreign policy.
What is independent investigation? What are international sources?
How about, what is the U.S. State Department?
What are your sources?
Media coverage for 200. All right. This accounts for the nature of media coverage of most issues in America over the last 200 years.
What is the American tradition of a free and independent press?
What is the corporate ownership of the media by the rich and the powerful, and the tendency of these groups to protect their own interests?
Well, that's the end of today's round of Media Jeopardy. So let's look at the scores. Mac is our top scorer, and in honor of your dedication to the calling of journalism, we're going to give you this special reporter's notebook with the facts already filled in.
When we talk about public access, nobody is telling us what to do. Nobody can tell us that you have to change the story because we're not going to fund you. We make the story, and nobody can tell us whether to keep it or change it. As long as we fall within the guidelines of what public access is, we can present freely the truth that we feel we want to present. Public access it's the only true freedom. It's the only true democratic system of television that exists right now. because there is not this question of ownership. And the question of ownership has become very great. That's all I have to say for now.
I recently produced a program called Veterans for Peace, The Last Campaign. One of the most important things that came out of that was that Veterans for Peace chapters around the country had to go out and find out if community access television existed in their area. And it gave them an opportunity to learn about community access and how it can help them in their organizing.
And you try to use whatever opportunities and spaces are available. But of course, the very first thing is that you have to develop a core or a cadre or whatever you want to call it, a body of somewhat informed people.
I'm a camcorder commando. You'll see there's lots of them around here today. These people running around with camcorders are people who are taking control over their own images and hopefully getting them to places where other people can see them. TV is being held captive. It is our mission to liberate it. We're taking control of our TV sets and taking control of our lives. We're not corporate owned and we're not under governmental control. And we are not an information conduit for the Pentagon. We will represent the issues that television is hiding from the American public. We are America's angriest home videos.
Good evening. We're going to take a break for a commercial. Good evening. We're going to take a break for a commercial. Good evening.
Mutiny, mutiny, rebels in the hold. Can't hold 'em, can't hold 'em, sling 'em up our board. Mutiny, mutiny, nothing disgraceful. Hang from the yard.
Deep dish.